All right. Welcome back, everyone. The Diet Diaries. I'm here with a guest today, my friend and colleague, Meghan Gould. Meghan and I have known each other for a long time. I don't know, many years at this point, virtually, never met in person, which I feel
Yeah.
like the norm nowadays. More like virtual friends than in person friends. And Meghan is an ultra running coach. And we have spent so much time talking over the years about food and body image and working out, and she also does strength training and mobility and kind of a lot of different kind of elements of movement. And I've been on her podcast and we've had a lot of conversations, and I wanted to have her on to come and talk about running and exercise and body image, because I think there's so many stories we have in our heads around what a runner looks like, how running impacts your body, how that connects to body image, and all the things that we think will happen from running, but maybe don't, and all of that. So, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. Yeah, we've gone back and forth on this topic. I feel like there is no end to this. And I'm actually really glad that we are doing this recording today because I just had this. I don't know. You know how sometimes you're a coach, you have a podcast. I'm constantly in this wave of trying to, create content, right? And so I just was having this day this morning driving in my car back from the gym and just having this thought about confidence and how that really plays into both what you and I do. So I feel like you've caught me on a really good day. Like this is going to be like a really good.
Love it. Yes. I know some days you're like, oh my God, I have to go like do a podcast. What the fuck am I
Yes.
going to talk about?
Yes.
But great. I'm glad that like we just so fortuitous. Um, so I think I'd love to kick off because I think when people hear ultra running,
Mhm.
which everyone who listens to this knows that don't even call myself like a runner, let alone an ultra runner. But what I've learned from you and from the women that I've been connected to through you is that it's actually so much different than what I thought it was, and that we all share the same struggles. And I think as it relates to kind of body image and what we think our bodies can do and our capacity for exercise and movement, um, I'd love to just kind of hear or let people hear a little bit of your background, how you got into this, why you do it, why you coach it, and we'll kind of
Mhm.
go from there.
Yeah. I started out as kind of what I think lots of women and girls start out in, middle school and high school playing sports of some capacity. I played soccer, I did gymnastics, I played softball, and I continued to play softball all the way through college, which was really great. I actually was just thinking about this the other day, like how grounding that was for me to have a common theme that I could pull through from, the early stages of my life. But then when I graduated college and go out into the quote unquote real world, there isn't really that same through point when it comes to team sports. Like you could play slow pitch or like beer league softball, but I tried that. It was not for me. And so then I was kind of not anchored to anything, and I had done some strength training in the gym, but back in those days it was very self-taught. As a female athlete, we didn't get the same types of coaching, which is crazy to say, and it makes me feel and sound so old. It's like, oh, as women we didn't really get that kind of coaching, but it's true. That kind of strength training,
Mhm.
coaching, that mentoring, that instruction was really mostly for the guys. And I joke a lot about how we as a team put together our own strength workouts. And part of it was from like Cosmo, and part of the other half of it was from a men's muscle and fitness. And we just cobbled it together. So it
Oh
was
my
really
God.
funny to watch us do it. So, very largely self taught in the beginning. And that kept going until I got to a point where I was strength training and running and working and traveling a lot. And if you listen to my podcast, I tell this story in depth on the very first episode. So I'll skip the shenanigans and just give you the quick and dirty version, which is basically I went out for a run, came back home, was on the floor stretching, and my back seized up. And then I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm like not doing the right stuff. And I
Mhm.
was just running to expend energy, quote unquote, be healthy and do all of the what I thought were the right things. But it turns out all those right things weren't the right recipe of things for me. And it landed me in kind of a world of hurt for many, many years with sciatic pain. And then I had like, radiating pain down my arm into my fingertips. And it kind of, that was the launching point that sent me off on, okay, because I had gone to see many doctors and they all wanted to do these invasive nerve tests and put me on all of these medications. And I just was sitting in these appointments thinking, I feel like we've skipped a few steps here. I feel like we've really jumped too far down the line and we're not doing our due diligence to back. Like nobody asked me any questions. They were just like, boom, here's, okay, we want to do this nerve testing. We want to do these muscle relaxers and stuff like that. And I was like, I just feel like there's something else. So basically that just like sent me off on this trajectory to go and have this like self-discovery journey about like how I could do stuff better that wasn't so invasive, that didn't require a ton of medicine. And I'm not saying Western medicine is bad by any stretch of the imagination. It just seemed to me like that was a bridge too far at that moment. So that's how I kind of got to the initial stages of running and movement and strength training and all that fun stuff.
Got it. I didn't know you played softball in college.
Yeah.
Cool. Where'd you go to college?
Tiny little school up in Burlington, Vermont called St. Michael's.
Okay. So what brought you from like kind of reevaluating the way you were taking care of your body and using movement, using exercise through this experience of pain to ultra running? And maybe even like less about what brought you there, but what is it about? First of all, I'm going to ask you to define ultra running.
Yep.
And then after that, what is it about ultra running that you love?
So ultras are typically defined as anything past a marathon. So a marathon is 26.2 miles. Ultras, typically the very first race distance is 31.2. That's kind of what we would call a 50K. That's like your intro to ultra running, right? That's the very first thing. And ultras are predominantly done on trails, off-road type of thing, but there are more ultras being done on the road now. I have a couple clients who have run road 50 milers, which is mind-boggling to me. Like that just sounds like that's not my version of fun, I should say, but it was a good race for them. So 50K, 50 miles, 100K, which is 62-ish miles, 100 miles. These are like the intervals, the race distances. And then now, like currently as we sit here recording, there's actually a 300-mile race taking place in Arizona. That's to date. I guess I can't quite say that because there are some other races that are a little bit longer, but that's there's a 300-mile race. I've run a 200-mile race. So there's lots of, it's everything past a marathon and beyond.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do those longer races take place over multiple days, obviously?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The male finisher for the Arizona Monster, the 300 race that just is taking place currently, they have 170 hours to complete the race, which is basically I looked it up, 7 days and 2 hours, because I actually have a friend who's doing it right now. And the male finisher, it's actually 309 miles, but they call it a 300-mile race. He finished in 89 hours and change, which is mind-boggling.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's insane. Wow.
Yeah.
I think like blows your mind. It's like what the human body is capable of. And not everyone, which is fine, but just.
And that's a really good segue actually, because you asked me the other questions, like how did I get into this? Yeah. It was, I started out running just like everybody, like most people do, just 3 miles around the block or, a local 5K, 10K, whatever. My brother actually challenged me to a half marathon when we were both living in Boston at the time. So we ran the Boston Athletic Association half marathon, just like way back in the day. And he beat me. He's 5 years younger than me, so we'll chalk it up to age, but he beat me back then. And that just sort of like set me, I was like, oh, okay. So half marathon, it was hard at the time, but it wasn't, it didn't kill me. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I will, living in Boston, the apex of running for many people is the Boston Marathon. I have never run it. I don't really have a desire to run it, partially because I don't consider myself to be a very fast runner. And so
Mhm.
to qualify without getting a charity spot or like a fundraising spot, I'd have to run a 3:40, I think now, 3 hours and 40 minutes. I've not been able
Wow.
to break 4 hours in a marathon. So I did a few road marathons and just thought, okay, this is fine. It's challenging. I don't love it, but I do like running. And then it was almost this weird experience where I came back to my apartment one day and I had a copy of Runner's World magazine. And it was kind of just crazy because the magazine had an article about ultra running. And I was just like, oh, wait, there's this whole other subsection of running that I didn't even know about. It takes place on trails, and I had hiked a ton as a kid, so
Mhm.
the concept I actually preferred being in the woods and being
Mhm.
on trails to being to dodging traffic, in Boston trying to run. And it just opened my eyes to the whole concept of there's this thing called ultra running. You can walk, you have snacks. It's just like
Yes.
very much more my speed. And
Okay.
so that's when I just started shifting gears, moved out of Boston for other reasons, and then came back to New Hampshire and just had access to more trails. And I thought, okay, this is a little more my speed. And so that's when I decided to train for and run a 50K. So that's how I kind of was like testing the waters.
I love that because it's so funny. I've like never actually heard your whole backstory around
Yeah.
this piece of it. But when you're like, you can walk and you have snacks, and you're
Yeah.
like, that's more my speed, right? In coaching, we talk so much about values and finding a way to move that there's maybe some level of enjoyment, right? I've kind of changed my tune a lot where years ago I'd be like, you have to love, you can love everything you do. Like that's just, it's just not like you
Yeah.
don't love paying bills, you don't love cooking dinner or things. We do these things because we have to, just like you have to do certain things to take care of your body. But you also don't want it to be in total misalignment, right? So to
Mhm.
find something that was kind of like a version of something you were interested in, I think is so interesting because we often have like really, I think kind of to your point, black and white perceptions around what certain things are, certainly around exercise. Um, so when you're like, you can walk and you can have snacks, it's like, oh, well, that sounds really fun.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's still the same sport, we're still running, but the vibe that you get at a road
Right.
race versus the vibe that you're gonna get at a ultra trail race is completely different. One appeals to one type of person, and there is some crossover for sure. I
Mhm.
know lots of people who run road races who also run trails and ultras, but the vibe at a trail and ultra race is going to be a little more laid back. Everybody's happy to see you. Um, Everyone's invested to a certain extent in everybody else's success.
Mhm.
It's not like other experiences like I've had at road running races where you will get mowed down if you are in
Mhm.
someone's way. And
Mhm.
at an ultra, if you trip and fall, someone's going to be there unless you're completely by yourself to just to scoop you up and be like, "Are you okay? Can I get you anything?" You know what I mean? It's just
Mhm.
a completely different vibe.
That's so interesting because hearing the word ultra running and ultra marathon, you would literally think it was the total opposite. And
Yeah.
I quite honestly, like I've gotten to know a little bit more from knowing you and speaking like in your group and listening and hearing about what the experience is like, but it's not what you would think. You would
Yeah.
literally think it's like even more hardcore than like people who run.
And there
Um,
certainly are lots of hardcore people. This gentleman who just finished a 300-mile race in 89 hours. That is bananas to me.
yeah,
I mean, like if I were doing that race, I would come in at 169 and
right,
30 minutes. You know what I mean?
right,
Like I'm just, I, I just know how I would function. I'm
right,
not fast. And again, the term fast is relative. It's all relative, but
right,
that's just how I would be. And so there are certainly elite ultra runners who are
right.
much faster, who take it very seriously. They're also exceptional human beings.
Mhm.
That's not, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can be
Right.
fast and be an elite and be a really nice human being at the same time. So,
Yes. So I'd love to hear about your relationship with running and kind
mm,
of your relationship with your body. Um, I have tried to run many times over the years, like become a runner. I remember at one point I was living in the city. I was like 24, 25, and a really good friend of mine, well, a lot of my friends worked in consulting and were building these crazy Excel models for work. And he built me like this Excel model to like track my running and my mileage and all of this. And I'm like, this is going to be the thing that's going to get me into it. And I just literally hated it. And at the
yeah.
time, and pretty much up until recently when I get kind of hit workouts programmed from my trainer, but anytime I ran, it was running will make me lose weight. Running
Mhm,
will make me smaller. Running will make me look like someone who runs. Running is the answer to my issues with food. Running will
mhm.
take care of whatever I ate the day before or will preempt whatever I'm going to eat. That has always been my relationship with running. And so I would love to hear what your relationship has been. Has it changed over the years between when you were just doing like 3 miles or a 5K to now when you train for these bigger races? Like, I would love to get into that.
Yeah. Well, my relationship with running started out early, in the sports context, which was, yes, you run to play soccer, like that's part of the sport, but running was punishment, right? We don't they don't call them suicides anymore, but like,
Mhm.
suicide drills,
Yep.
back and forth and those types of things, and running in softball, sprinting the bases, like it was a necessary part of the sport, but then anything above that was almost like punishment.
Mhm.
And I didn't really like view it that way, but I did have some element of what you were describing before about in and out in terms of calories and food, especially as I got into college and beyond. Like, got to balance out the energy in, expenditure out type of a thing. I think when I started to run post college, it was, yes, as a caloric expenditure, it was also a way to like process stress and process, living on your own and trying to figure out the world, navigate everything that's going on, but stay healthy, and as well, like, have some sort of a social outlet too. Oh, hey, do you want to go for a run? That was kind of a way to bond with
Mhm.
some of my coworkers and, to make friends and whatnot. And then after I ran, a couple marathons, and I did largely all of my training by myself. As much as I say it was a way for me to bond with other people, I really like running by myself
Mhm.
because it's a low stakes environment. There's no pressure. Nobody has to go my pace. I don't have to worry about other people, me holding people back or vice versa. So I really do like the quiet and the alone time. It helps me process. It helps me, because as you know, if you're working with clients and doing a podcast and trying to come up with content ideas, like sometimes you just need a break.
Mhm.
Like you have to completely disconnect from people and to clear the noise in your head. And that's a real big part of running for me. There are a lot of people, and I do fall into this category too, that use running and specific. It's very specific as well in ultra running to process like grief and trauma too.
Mhm.
People, you will find a very common theme amongst, I don't want to say all, but many people who are ultra running, that they've had some sort of trauma, some sort of, major life event
Mhm.
that running has helped them through. And part of the reason I think a lot of us like ultras is that it gives us an opportunity to go past where we thought our limit was
Mhm.
and expand and explore some of that space. So if you've only ever gone a half marathon or a marathon, you're like, okay, well, going back to what I said earlier, I didn't die. So what happens if I go further, like
Mhm.
continuing to push those boundaries? And so that that has become my relationship with it now. I'm not in danger of winning any races. I'm not even in danger of winning my age group or my category. I'm just in it to see what my personal limits and like what my comfort zone is.
Okay.
And there's a lot of times where I spend a good majority of the time outside of my comfort zone.
And so how has that, because I'm going to kind of pull in some things that you and I have
Yeah.
talked about, right? Where changes you've had in your body over the
Yeah.
years. Um, is there in your brain or even physically, a connection between that and running for you, right? In the way that your body has changed, has running impacted that or not? Is that
Mhm.
something that you think about or I guess struggle with in any way?
I think that running has helped me navigate aging,
Mhm.
um, because while I haven't ever truly struggled with my weight per se, because I've been roughly the same size and shape. Maybe sometimes I'll have more definition, maybe sometimes when I'm not running and not lifting and kind of like at a low point, I'll put on some more weight, but I've not had a real big fluctuation.
Mhm.
But I do think that having running in my life has helped me kind of stay, I'm going to kind of say, on the straight and narrow, and I
Mhm.
don't mean that in like a good, or like just kind of
Yeah.
stay on a good trajectory.
Yeah.
And it's a good litmus test for me, that it's kind of like helps me to gauge where I'm at.
Mhm.
um and again, I do think because it has been really helpful for me to like process life and stress and
Mhm.
all the stuff that we go through, even though I might take breaks from it, it definitely is one of the things that I consistently come back to, because I do, it's definitely challenging, but I do like to push myself,
Mhm.
at my own pace, but challenge myself in a way that is meaningful to me. Yeah.
Mhm. So you coach women
Hmm.
to their first 50K, right?
Yes.
That's like your thing, right? Which is the 31.5 miles beyond a marathon.
Yep. Yep.
What are like with all the women that you've worked with,
Mhm.
what are or are there, I should say maybe, some of the struggles that women have around this?
Mm.
Like in terms of why they're doing it, what they expect out of it. Is there a weight loss component, right? How does the food piece kind of pull in, right? Certainly when you're running these distances, there's a certainly a food as fuel element to it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I'm just curious, like, what are some of the things that you've noticed or observed in kind of like the population of women that you've worked with?
Yeah. I think the comfort zone, stretching your boundaries, is probably the number one reason why women that I see, that I work with, come into this sport, because
Mhm.
they've done a half, they've done a full, they didn't die.
Mhm.
They're curious, like, some of them have kind of the same progression that I mentioned earlier about myself. Like, they've kind of maxed out on the road stuff. They heard the rumor that like there's this, sister sport where you
Mhm.
can run on the trails, there's snacks, you can walk,
Mhm.
so like the
Yeah.
word is getting out, and it just feels like more of their vibe, just in the same way
Yeah.
as it has been for me. And I think a lot of it comes down to kind of what I talked about at the very beginning, which is this like confidence piece, and
Mhm.
kind of exploring who they are
Mhm.
as individuals.
Mhm.
Now, I don't have kids, but I think as we, in our 20s, our 30s, and our 40s, and so on and so forth, we have like new facets of our identity as we go through. And especially
Mhm.
if you are a mother and you have kids and you've devoted a lot of time and energy and attention to them,
Mhm.
there is a little bit of you that maybe gets lost along the way.
Mhm.
And as those kids start to grow up and age out, you're kind of left with some time. Now, what do you do with this time? Oh, I
Mhm.
used to love to do this. Maybe it was running. I want to
Mhm.
go back to that, but I
Mhm.
can't quite do it in the way that I had done it before. Like, maybe I was fast, or maybe I was competitive, or maybe I liked it, but I never really got enough time because I was either, pregnant or postpartum, and it didn't really work for me. Then I had little
Mhm.
kids and I
Mhm.
couldn't run and manage little kids at the same time
Mhm.
enough to build up any consistency where I could do something with that training. Okay, now here's a time when I can start to do that.
Mhm.
And everything in between. I mean, there's lots of different reasons why people come to this sport, but I think a lot of it is, wanting to challenge themselves. I don't see too much to kind of go back to what you were saying earlier about the weight loss component of it.
Mhm.
I think at some point or another, most of us who run have used running in that way.
Mhm.
But the tricky part with, and you and I have talked about this a lot, especially inside the group, the tricky part about running and weight loss is that when you up your mileage,
Mhm.
you also have to up your food.
Mhm.
to fuel properly for that.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
when we get into ultra running and long runs and fueling on your long runs,
Mhm.
this can be a little bit of a challenge and where you have to do a little bit of work. And I also had to do this work because it was a foreign concept to me that I would eat while I was running. Like the whole
Mhm.
snacks was very interesting to me, but
Mhm.
then I really had to relearn how to feed myself, when to feed myself in
Mhm.
my everyday, but then also when we're talking about trying to run longer than, 90 minutes, okay, now we're going to need to onboard some carbs. And
Mhm.
if you've got old messaging, let's say about
Yep.
carbs being quote unquote bad,
Right.
this is where you can start to get some of that conflict.
Yeah.
So I think it has been helpful. It's been helpful for me. It's been helpful for a lot of the women that I have worked with to kind of, I'm going to say like deprogram, but I don't mean it in any sort of bad way.
Yeah.
It's just like
Yeah.
you're rewriting
Yeah.
what you've been taught, right? So going back to, running as punishment in your
Yeah.
sport.
Yeah.
It's almost like a whole new leaf or new page has been turned over for running because, oh, now it's fun. We do it for enjoyment. Oh,
Yeah.
we eat while we run. We eat
Yeah.
lots of carbs. That's our primary fuel. Like, and it's not bad. Like, nobody's dying because they're
Mhm.
ingesting all of these carbs and running all these miles. What the heck?
Mhm.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. I love that. It's almost like this, what you're talking about is kind of the opposite of most people's experience with running
Hmm.
and their kind of perceptions or preconceived notions of what running is, right? Like you've
Yeah.
talked so much about like expanding your capacity and testing your limits, which is making me think a lot about strength training. I think that's the
Hmm.
lens through which I have experienced this, right? Seeing what your body is capable of, which when we think about like our bodies, we're so used to thinking about like their size and their shape and what they look like, and not at all about what they do,
Hmm.
and even just like a day to day functional level, then sort of this bigger, like, you know, larger physical challenge and sort of more even like I don't say like existential, but like what can I
Yeah.
really do? What is my body capable of? I mean, running a 31-mile race is significant.
Yeah.
So is running a marathon, so is running a half marathon. All these things are significant. But that is like it is a known and established and evidence-based tool that identifying and thinking about and focusing on what your body can do can really help to respond to the focus and the fixation on what our bodies look like.
Hmm.
And then what's so interesting is just like layering on the food piece, right? Is that right again, like so many people, and I think this is why I wanted to have you on because I think so many women listening will have run or come to running or think about running as a weight loss mechanism and as a way to burn off calories, earn calories. So to have this experience in this community, in this like branch of the sport where it actually is an opportunity to rethink what food does for you, how it makes you feel, how it provides energy, how it allows your body to do what it does is so fucking cool.
Hmm.
And unexpected. And it's awesome, and especially because it's around carbs,
Hmm.
right? It's like with strength training, yes, carbs play a role, but it's a lot about the protein, and people I feel like are so sick of hearing about protein right now. They're like, "All right, enough already. I get it." But there's the carb thing it will always be a thing because it was just so deeply ingrained into us. So
Yeah.
I think this is so interesting and so valuable. And I'm just so glad to like have this space like to talk about this. I think it's going to be like a big switch flip for people.
I hope so. Two things that I want to say before I forget, because that's a real
Yep.
problem with me. First, when you were talking about body size and shape and
Mhm.
image and the way we view ourselves, one of the kind of selling points for me when it came to trails and ultras was that I you're going to see so much variety
Mhm.
in size, shape, uh, composition, age, just the general demographics of people at an ultra versus a road race. Now,
Mhm.
I will say, when I was road running, it was 15 plus years ago. So that sport has also expanded in all of those
Mhm.
categories as well. But ultras, I mean, I've been beat in races by people who are 3 times my size, 3 times my age. And
Mhm.
I am just like, absolutely, like go
Yeah.
for it. You know what I mean? So you can't show up to quite honestly any race now, but definitely an ultra and prejudge anybody by
Mhm.
how they look
Mhm.
because you know it's not the cover that matters to this book. It's all the pages are the training, right, that this
Yes.
person has done. um so that's thing number one. Thing number
Mhm.
two, I think that would probably maybe blow your audience's mind is the types of carbs that we are potentially
Mhm.
eating, especially during some of these longer races. Because, when we talk about trying to fuel yourself as an athlete, and I
Mhm.
use that word pretty liberally because that's how I think of that's the mindset that I have tried to adopt for myself because it puts me in a better headspace to make good decisions about my training and what I will do and won't do. Like if I think of myself like an athlete,
Mhm.
even again, if I'm in no danger of winning anything, I still think I make better decisions when I call myself an athlete and treat myself that way. So
Mhm.
I use that word pretty liberally. And I've gotten lots of messages from people who listen to the podcast or people that I work with who are like, why do you keep calling me an athlete? Because you are, first of all, so it's
Mhm.
kind of a mindset shift for those types of people. So if you're thinking about yourself as an athlete, you're thinking, okay, high quality foods, high quality this and that. And then if you were to go to an aid station, which is like a pit stop along
Mhm.
the route of an ultra, you're going to see Oreos and M&Ms and like nerd gummy clusters and
Mhm.
potato chips and PB&J sandwiches. You're going to and like Coke and ginger ale. You're going
Yep.
to see lots of quick carbs like
Yep.
in the form of largely sugar. And
Yep.
so it blows some people's mind because they think how is this possible? But there's plenty of people who mix it up and do much more high quality food with I'll call it low quality sugar, like simple
Mhm.
sugars.
Mhm.
They mix it up a little bit. I'm one of those people, but some people do just exclusively fuel their runs on those simple sugars, and it's
Mhm.
because that's the quick source that you can
Right.
onboard and utilize quickly.
Right.
It's not tons of protein, although we want some of that. It's not a
Yes.
ton of fiber, which is
Yep.
definitely not something that we want while
Nope.
we're out there running.
It's
So it's
low.
like
Yep.
it's a mindset shift is
Yeah.
like, how are you going to fuel your sport for the immediate and then, the long term, like the recovery afterwards, all that.
Yeah. I think it's I mean, it's science, right? This is
Yes.
literally how the body takes in and breaks down energy and then utilizes it,
Hmm.
right? At a cellular level.
Hmm.
And those simple carbs are broken down and they're much more readily accessible when you have
Yeah.
fiber. It slows the whole process down,
Yep.
right? This is science of how our bodies work, which is we get so wrapped up emotionally and have so many meanings assigned to these foods, right? Like I think maybe even one of your groups, someone talked about eating Sour Patch Kids,
Oh
maybe.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right, like candy. You said M&Ms, right? All that
Yep.
stuff. And oh, Sour Patch Kids are bad. They're junk food. I binge on those. All these things, but like in in this is a very specific circumstance, but like your body is using that in a very specific way. That's how it's meant and need to be used. And if you want to do this with your body, this is what you have to do. Like, if you don't eat that stuff, I mean, I just imagine you'll, like, fall flat on your face at some point
Absolutely.
during the run. Like, your body
Yeah.
will just shut down.
Yes, absolutely. I
Um,
mean, you're going to hit that wall, and this is
yeah,
part of the reason why people don't go past whatever distance they're at. So
right.
this could even happen before you get to a full marathon. It could happen at a half or even a
Mhm,
5K, 10K. Like if this is, the farthest you've ever gone is the farthest you've ever gone. So
right.
you sort of have to like work with where you're at. And if that 5K takes you an hour, you might be on the verge of needing a little boost in the
Yeah,
form of some sort of sports drink
yep,
or a quick hit like a couple gummy bears or some jelly beans or something like
right.
to just get some sugar on board to help you keep going. And
Yes.
this is one of those things that people think that fueling on a run is relegated only for elite athletes or people who are
Mhm,
running super long distances. No, like you might be listening to this struggling to get through a 5K, and I want to encourage you like, hey, maybe onboard a little bit of sugar, like have
mhm,
something with you. Maybe it's a half a PB&J instead
mhm.
of gummy worms or whatever, but
Right.
like that might be the thing that helps you click over to the next distance and be able to
Yes,
go keep going further and further.
yes. Yeah. I love that you said that, right? Because it's all relative. It's where people hit
Hmm.
that wall based on their their training capacity and their adaptations, right, is going to be different. And there's such an opportunity there to see, to be able to look at things more objectively, right? This is what this food is doing for my body in this moment, and really feeling that, right? Because I imagine once you, if you start to get depleted and then you have that intake of sugar, I imagine that you feel that pretty quickly and you feel
Yes.
like the energy and you're able to keep going.
Mhm.
That, like, that's really cool to be able to feel your body using what you just put into it in a very immediate way. And that's
Mhm.
such a powerful way to start to break down the emotional baggage, for lack of a better term, that we have around those foods,
Yeah.
right? And the way we've always eaten them and how we've eaten them.
Yep.
And that's like, it's an unexpected way to do that, but it's so cool. And I think, again, coming from thinking about running and all the things that people think about running, it's almost cool that running is the thing that could potentially help you do that.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
like full
that's
circle.
like, what? Yeah, it's kinda wild.
I like it because it has really forced me to rethink the terms good and bad.
Yeah, yeah.
And like really think about, to take a page out of your book, like what's the job of this
Mhm,
food?
mhm.
And like in, you can't see it, it's behind me, but like in my bookshelf behind me, I've got a whole thing of waffles, like Belgian waffles from Costco that are individually packaged that I am super stoked about taking on my next long run because like that's a really palatable, yummy, like exciting food that's going to deliver a lot of carbs for me. It's going to be,
Mhm.
and so looking for those kinds of things and getting to have things, eat things that my old self might have been like, oh, you can't have that, but
Right,
then flipping the script and being able to say, like, oh, looking forward to my long 20-mile run because look at all the fun food I get to have. And
right,
not only fun food, but like, what's it going to do for me? Like, it's a catch 22. I'm going to get to eat this food and it's going to help me get my bigger goal, which is longer miles in service of completing that big race that's coming up.
right. It's not like I get to have this food because I'm running 20 miles and I'm burning off the calories. I get to
Correct.
have this food because it is fueling me. It's actually allowing me,
Yes.
empowering me, enabling me to do this thing with my body.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's like on the outside, it might look the same as the old story, but it's a totally different narrative
Yes.
that's happening.
Yes. The other thing I want to be sure that, circling back to at the beginning when I said you caught me on a really good day because we want
Yeah.
to talk about confidence. I think one of the things that keeps me and keeps a lot of women in this sport
Mhm.
is the fact that, when you've been able to do that thing that you have set out to do. So whether it's run a half, and like this is irrespective of ultras, like it could be any distance, 5K all the way through 300 miles. But when you set that goal to run that race and then you follow through and you do all of the work, you do all the training and you
Mhm.
complete it,
Mhm.
there's like this tiny little like check in the win column that goes
Mhm.
into the back of your brain and it just
Mhm.
starts to build that confidence
Mhm.
in yourself. I don't necessarily say self confidence. I personally think of those two things as separate. Like, I have a lot of confidence in myself and my abilities. I don't think I necessarily always have self confidence.
Mhm.
It's a little bit of I don't know if the distinction makes sense to anybody outside of my brain, but every time that I've been able to, set a target, set a goal to complete a race or do something, whether it was a race or whether it was, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm just going to use that 20-mile run as an example, right?
Mhm.
Go out and do that. There's like a little tiny check that goes
Mhm.
in that win column. And now that's like a new level, a new
Yep.
threshold that I've set for myself that nobody can take away from me. So it
Mhm.
doesn't really matter what you do for work. It doesn't matter,
Mhm.
how many kids you have, if you have kids or whatever, right? Like, doesn't matter, but you're starting to find these ways to put checks in your win column and build
Mhm.
confidence in yourself that
Mhm.
maybe you didn't have before as an athlete
Mhm.
because you weren't somebody who did sports as a kid
Mhm.
or, dance or anything like that. So you
Mhm.
really haven't had the opportunity to move your body in this way and build confidence in yourself and your ability to do this thing. And that's why I'm such a huge fan of running in general, but also ultras for women, because again, it's a sport where you can go as fast or as slow as you want, right? Most people, when they hear that you run an ultra, well, I should say lots of people ask like, "Oh, how fast are you?" I'm always like, "Not at all," and I'm proud
Mhm,
of it. Like,
mhm,
so,
mhm,
giving people permission to like lose speed out of their vocabulary.
mhm.
But they're just people are just in awe of people, specifically women, who run ultras because it is so far outside of their own wheelhouse that most often they're thinking, "Oh, I wouldn't even drive that far, let
Right,
alone walk
right,
or run that far." And
right.
so, I don't have the stats in front of me, but there are some crazy stats about how small ultra running is in the
Mhm.
grand scheme of things. And um, it's just kind of cool to be part of this, very small, but even when you're in it, you think, oh, everybody does it. And then I have to really like
Pull
remove
back.
myself,
Yeah,
pull back and think like, oh, actually, no, not everybody does this. It is pretty unique. And that's why I think it's such a great thing for women in general,
yeah,
because you can get these wins,
yep,
bank them, build that confidence in yourself that oftentimes gives. I've seen it where, doing something like this has given them the confidence to get a new job
oh, for
or
sure.
move
Yep,
over here or ask for more money or leave a bad relationship.
yep,
That, like um, do something to improve some area of their life. And it was
yeah,
because they showed themselves that they could do this thing. So if I
yes,
can do this,
yes.
what else can I do?
Totally. Yes. I think like you're making me think a lot about self-efficacy and
Hmm.
self-esteem, right? So self-efficacy is like your belief in your ability to do the thing that you want to do or that you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
And that's often like in coaching, that's the thing. It's like we want to do these things, but there's the gap between wanting to do them and actually doing them.
Yep.
And it's about building up that capacity and that evidence to do that thing. And the more you get that evidence, and the more likely and the easier it is to keep going because you know that you can do it.
Hmm.
And absolutely it has spillover into other parts of our lives. And this happens anywhere. And the big thing I'm thinking about, like as you're talking, is right, we're talking about running, specifically ultra running, and all the kind of these experiences and these benefits in terms of physical ability, what your body can do, and the emotional component, the confidence, the self-efficacy. But it's like, okay, well, maybe this will like some people like, oh my God, I want to try this, right? But there are other areas in which this same thing applies, right?
Hmm.
Like for me, I'm kind of thinking about like strength training, right? And I'm not interested in being like a power lifter or anything, but like I go to the gym and I'm like, oh cool, like I was able to add on like another plate today, or I did an extra rep. Like I am pushing my body and kind of testing those limits.
Hmm.
Or maybe it's in a sport that you play, right? And improving at that or being able to play for longer. Or I'm even thinking about dance classes that I've taken. Like I went to this cardio dance class a couple weeks ago. So much fun. It was basically 50 minutes straight of high intensity cardio dance. And it was so much fun because the music and the steps, and it was great. But by the end, we ran through the routine like 7 or 8 times in a row. I was like, "Oh my god, I think I'm dying. Like, is this over yet?" But, like, I kept going and I kept doing it because it was so much fun, but I'm like, I'm dancing and I've just, like, expanded kind of my body's capacity to do this. Like, there's so many ways, what I'm trying to say, there's so many ways in which to have the experience you're talking about.
Yep.
Running and ultra running are one of them, but there's other ways, and I guess I'm hoping that as folks are listening, that that's the wheels that it gets turning, to
Yes.
see having this type of experience and relationship to some form of movement,
Hmm.
exercise, those things overlap in some ways and not in others, is so powerful and so transformative in so many ways,
Hmm.
right? Which I'm not going to summarize because we've talked about them, but
Yeah.
that's like, it doesn't have to be running. Could be, but it doesn't have to be.
I think running in particular is that thing for people because you're not relying on any external assistance. It's
Yep.
not a bike, it's not a pair of skates, it's
Mhm.
not skis, it's not any other equipment.
Yep.
It's you and your feet. And
Yep.
so it's kind of very raw in that sense and very like primal for people to go out and walk and run for in the case of that 300 race, like hours and days on end, and to do it overnight on no sleep. And, that's when you start to get into the 100 milers and longer. So if that's not your jam, please don't let me like dissuade you from trying, ultra running if you're not into staying up all night and,
Yeah.
doing crazy overnight headlamp runs. But I do think there's a specific draw to running and ultra running for that kind of like primal reason, because
Mhm.
there's nothing between you and it.
Mhm.
Like you and it are like one and the same.
Yes. Yeah, it really is like a very deep primal connection to your body,
Hmm.
right? And it's just right. It's just you and your body,
Hmm.
right? And I mean, this gets so can get like so existential, but right, it's not about all these other kind of externally driven things.
Yep.
It's about what's inside of you, both physically and mentally, which I think is really cool.
The mental piece, I think, is especially as you start to get into the longer distances and you build that confidence in yourself, your abilities to go out and do all the miles, then
Mhm.
it becomes, at least for me and for many of the people that I have worked with, it becomes less about the physical aspect. And that's not to say that the physical training isn't important, but it becomes more about, okay, now I want to get to a place where instead of exploring the physical, I want to kind of root around up here in my
Mhm.
brain and see
Mhm.
what the heck is going on up there. Because
Yep.
more so than I think a lot of other sports, and everything is obviously relative. There are lots of other sports that I would probably find very challenging and could give me these same benefits. But to go back to what we were just talking about how running is so primal, I think it is the thing, because there's nothing you can blame it on,
Mhm.
right? Like, oh, my bike broke. I'm like, no, you don't have that. Like, it's
Yep.
you. So
Right.
when you rub up against your limit, what
Mhm.
do you do? Do you break? Do you
Mhm.
quit? Do
Mhm.
can you talk yourself out of it? And so that's, I feel like, the draw, at least for me and for many other people that I know, to go keep going longer and longer and longer, and to do a 100 and a 200 and a beyond, right?
Mhm.
Because that threshold does get pushed out, the point at which, I'm not saying you physically have a mental break, but the point at which maybe your spirit starts to break a little, and you have to do the work to dig deep to find the fire to keep going and to
Mhm.
assess, is this really my end? Is this my edge? Or
Mhm.
could I keep going? And if I want to keep going, what do I need to do
Mhm.
mentally and physically and emotionally to steer myself in the right direction and
Mhm.
then go again,
Yeah.
So that's part of the other appeal, the draw for
Yeah.
people to do some of these crazy, in air quotes, crazy ultra
Mhm.
running
Yeah.
races.
And then the way that that applies and carries over to challenges that we face
Mhm.
in life, right? From little mundane stuff that sometimes seems overwhelming to like major life altering things like illness and jobs and moves and all of these things. Like,
100%.
how does that help you build up your capacity to tolerate, to deal, to move through with the discomfort that comes with that? And
Yep.
you're again, that self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to do that.
Mhm.
Um,
I think
right.
you're so much more able to, I know me personally, I am much more capable of handling day-to-day shenanigans because I now know what hard is.
Mhm.
Again, like, to go back to what I said earlier, like, the longest you've ever run to date is the longest you've ever run. That's the hardest thing potentially that you've done in running, right?
Mhm.
And so that will be your upper limit. That will be your threshold until you push past it and establish a new upper limit, a new threshold. And every time you do that, your tolerance for discomfort. Some people say suffering. I don't choose to use that word because I've actively signed up for this, so I don't feel like I can
Mhm.
can and should use the word suffering when
Mhm.
I've checked the box and signed
Mhm.
my name and said I want to do this. But like, the more you make yourself uncomfortable in some of
Yeah.
these other ways, you start to get more comfortable with that annoying email or that neighbor that, like,
Yep.
just, their dog keeps pooping on your lawn. I don't know, just thinking of random examples
Yes.
here, right? But
Yeah.
like, the simple annoyances that used to make you super jacked up, those don't even register anymore. And it's
Right.
kind of cool to see, because now your everyday kind of temperament is a little more calm, a little more relaxed. You're not flappable, you're like, that's nothing. Like, I've done
Mhm.
this and I've done that. And like,
Mhm.
oh, that's not uncomfortable. I could totally do that. You start to have
Yep.
a better perspective on some things and a better
Yeah.
gauge for how much you can tolerate and
Yep.
what your limit truly is in terms of physical output.
Yep. Yeah, you get better at dealing with discomfort by dealing with discomfort.
100%.
That's it, right? It's like our human bodies that are amazing and adapt and evolve do so by what they're exposed to.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just it in every facet of life, right? This that kind of that principle and that reality holds true.
And there's
Um,
no way to shortcut it either.
no, there's not. People think that there is, but there is not.
Yeah, there's no hack for this.
No.
I think that's one of the parts about this sport that I like a lot is that you can hack your way to success in a lot of other areas, in a lot of other sports sometimes. You definitely have to have skill for certain things like basketball and golf and,
Mhm.
things like that. But this you cannot hack your way to. It'll be very apparent if you show up to the starting line of a 50K or a 100 miler and you have done the training or you have not done the
Right.
training. So there's very little faking
Mhm.
that you can get away with.
Yep. So if people want to learn more about this or about you, can you share kind of where people can find you, what your resources are?
Yeah, everything that I put out into the world is under the name She Runs Ultras. So I'm on Instagram at She Runs Ultras. I'm on Facebook at She Runs Ultras. I have a podcast called She Runs Ultras. So try to consolidate and put it under one name. But I have got lots of got probably like 200. I don't know, what are we on? 267 episodes of the podcast. I started it back in right before 2020. So it kind of documents my journey from running. I had already run a couple 50Ks at that point, but it follows me through my journey through running a couple 100 milers, a 200 miler. I'm currently training for the Moab 240, which is in October. So it's a 240-mile race. I don't think I'm quite at the 300. Don't know that I'm going to go to 300, but this is another one of those questions that we don't have time for today. But like, which is like, at what point do you stop?
Right.
Like, at what point is it
Right.
enough?
Right.
We could shelf that for another
Yeah.
time. But if you are
Yeah.
interested in ultras, come find me over there. You can jump on my email list, just like Jordana. I send an email every week with tips and tricks, and no hacks or shortcuts, but just findings and musings, things that are going on, and ways to help you kind of like get into this sport if you're at all interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. This has been great.
Thank you for having me. Super excited.